Okay, let's see how much you've forgotten over a snow day. So, this is what we did the other day. Now, do you remember that we want to make those bases be the same? So we want to replace the 8 with something equal to 8, because that's the rules in math. It's called substitution. I pull out the 8. What do I put in? Come on, help me out. Yes, 2 to the third. And this 2 to the third here now sets up bases the same on both sides, which you can't technically cancel the 2's. Correct your friends if they tell you you can. You actually can set the powers equal, though. And a common mistake would be this. And I totally get the mistake. Do you get what I just did wrong? What should I have put? 3x plus 12. All right, good. And then anybody can solve this one. You just subtract the smaller of the two variables. Okay. Does this ring a bell? That's what you did right before we left. But they got weird when we got to the end. It was like this. 1/2 to the 2x is equal to like 16 to the x minus 4 or something like that. So how do you make 16 be a 1/2? Or how do you make the 1/2 be a 2 and the 16 be a 2? In other words, we could change both of them to 2's, or we could change both of them out of base of 1/2. Do either one. I'm okay with that. Either make both of them into 2 to a power. You can't just say that's a 2. That's not 2. But you can replace it with a 2 to a power. Or you can replace just the 16 with a 1/2 to a weird power. Do it either way. Come up with the answer and check with the kid next to you. Let's see how much you remember. Give this a pause while you give it a try. Okay, so this 16 could be made into 1/2 to the what would make a 16? 1/2 to the 4th power would give you 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. Cool. I'm at 1 over 16 if I put it to the 4th power. Do you get how I want it to be 16, but I also want to get it to flip? Do you get you could have made it with 1/2 to the negative 4? That's the same thing as a 16. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm replacing this with the 16 here with this because that would be 16. The negative would make it flip and be 2, and then the 2 to the 4th is 16. And then I'd still have an x minus 4 here. Now, I personally think that that way is awesome if you're really good at these powers. And then I'm going to finish it that way just to show the people that did do it that way. I don't know. Is there anybody that did it that way? Made it into a 1/2 to a power? Awesome. If you're good at these powers, that's a great way to go. And then you'd have to say 2x equals negative 4x plus 16. And you might be thinking, I didn't get anything like that. It's because you did it a different way. But if you solve your equation, you probably will. If you did it right, you'll get the same thing. I'm getting rid of the smaller one, which is the negative 4. So I'm adding 4 to both sides. 6x equals 16. Divide by 6. 16 6, which does reduce to 8/3. How many of you got that, but you may have got it a different way? Either way is fine. Okay. If you didn't get that, watch, here's a different way. Well, I'll show you how we could have done this by making them both have a base of 2. Would you agree that 1/2 kind of looks like a 2? Except it's what? Well, it's to the negative 1 power. Then that's just replacing that, and now I got to bring in this part, which is not seen, but it's 2x. So then I've got to put it to the 2x. There, now I've exactly replicated what was on the left side, just replaced a 1/2 with a 2 to the negative 1. And this one, it's replaced with a 2 to the 4. And then your equation would be negative 2x equals 4x minus 16. And it should still come out to the same exact thing. I'm going to add 4x to both sides. And I get 2x equals 6x minus 16. I'm going to add 16 to both sides. 16 equals 6x, and there it is. It's the same exact thing. X equals 16 over 6, which could reduce to 8/3. And that's another way you could have done it. Those are not easy, especially not without a calculator. And you will not have a calculator on this next test. You'll have to do that like I just did. I never went to a calculator. I doubt you did either, right? So I see a couple cell phones out on desks. Not okay. Put them away. Because as soon as that thing goes off, you're going to pick it up, and then I would have grounds to take it away. All right. So on this, can you change that to the that? No, that one doesn't work nice. Just a second. There. 1/8 to the negative 2/3 power. Can you figure out what that comes out to? Hint, I personally would do it in 3 steps. I'd take my 1/8 and I'd put it to the fraction first. Try to remember that for this unit. Fraction first. And then if 1/3 was multiplied by 2, you'd get the 2/3, right? And then if that was multiplied by a -1, you'd get negative 2/3. So I've just broke up the negative 2/3 power into 3 simple steps. See if you can do this. We practiced this too. The good part was we had a long lesson 2 days ago. And you had yesterday off. But if you can handle this, this is the new stuff for today. It's the same fractions to fraction powers. All right. What I need to do is take the 3rd root of 1 and the 3rd root of 8. And some people might be getting confused because this is a fraction and so it looks scary, but what's the cube root of 1? It's just 1. Because 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. And what's the cube root of 8? What times what makes 8? 2. So therefore it's 1, because the top is 1, and the bottom is 2, so it's a 1/2. There. I've just taken the cube root of it. Another way to think of that is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/8. Then what's left? Squaring and putting to the -1. So then, what's 1/2 squared? 1/4. And then what's 1/4 to the -1? 4. Raise your hand if you had 4. All right. So, people weren't paying attention on the last one. It makes me nervous. Make sure you pay attention on this one. All right. So let's say I had 9/4 to the -3/2 power. Pause for a second while you give this a try. Okay, did you remember to go 9/4 to the fraction first? And then the top of the fraction. And then the negative is last. Then that way at the end all you got to do is flip it. Okay? So AS in the back corner. What did you get when you got the square root of this? 3/2. And now what's left to do still? To the 3rd, and then to the, good. And then if I cube it, did you make 3 to the 3rd 27? And the other one? All right, 27/8. And then I just got to do the -1, and then the last step. Final answer? 8/27. Any questions on that one? Okay. I feel like this is going to be pretty easy for you, really, because we worked really hard on this the other day. As long as you've been getting these, you're going to be okay on the homework. You might have to come up and ask me individual questions if you get stuck. I'm going to start the worksheet with you because it's about fraction exponents. Oh, one more thing. I did this the other day, but I didn't do it today. let's say I had 8 and I put it to the, and then I put it to the, is that 8 to the 3/4 or the 4/3, remembering that the roots go on the bottom just like plants? 8 to the, well, you're going to have to vote in a second. 8 to the 4/3 or 8 to the 3/4. I'm going to call it option A. Option B. Which one do you think it is? How many think A? Raise your hand for A. How many think B? Raise your hand for B. All right. A few very tentative hands on that last one, but it's A. A is the correct one. The root is this part, and the roots go on the bottom, just like in plants. Okay. All right, I think that covers it. Now, let's find that worksheet. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, I decided to show the people at home where we are. We are doing this one, 2-21, fractional exponents. And the homework. And it's a big old hairy scary worksheet. And so when it pops up, I encourage you to look at the even problems. And we are going to do the evens. You may skip the odds. All right, so here's the first one, number 2. Because you're going to skip the odds and do the evens. 1/2 power and then the negative. I would do them separate. And I always do the fraction first. So what's 1/2 mean? That means square root. Did you realize it was 5/3 to get the square roots? Okay. And then that's still to the -1. So what's the final answer? 3/5. That's all there is to it. Okay. Now down here, these are going to be a little more complicated because, you know, they're solving equations. How do I solve that? I touched on it briefly the other day, but I'll remind you. If I have x to the 2/3 and I want to get rid of the 2/3 so that the x is alone, I put it to the power of what? 3/2. And then we practiced this already. Now you got this 16 to the 3/2. And I like the deal where you break it up, you know, into 16 to the 1/2 to the 3. Because everybody in here can do the square root of 16. And then everybody in here can do whatever that is times itself 3 times. Okay, so you shouldn't use a calculator on this because you won't have one for the test. All right, for number 14, your first step would be to add 16, and then you're going to get rid of the power. Then you'd put it to the 2/3 power. And 27 is the perfect number to put to the 2/3 power. We picked that not randomly. We picked it on purpose so that it would work nice. So you're going to put this to the 2/3 power. Don't ever say times 2/3 because it's not what you're doing. You're putting it to the 2/3 power. And then there'll be one last step. Oh, that's a 6. Oh, I put a 2 there. And you'll have a little equation. 2x minus 6 equals some number. Okay, so it does say in here, remember to check for any extraneous solutions. As in, if you get the answer and it doesn't actually work, that's called an extraneous answer. How do you know if it works? You can always plug it back in the original. How could you end up with 2 answers? Do you remember these? You remember how those look like it just has one answer, and then you realize, oh, and it could be negative? Like 4 and -4 both work? It's because you were putting it to the 1/2 power. Anytime you put it to a fraction power, you got to check and see if you just did an even root. Because even roots like that cause you to have 2 answers. It's the absolute value of x, and you can break it into 2 parts then. +4 and -4. So anytime you put it to a fraction power, if you have an even root on that, it needs 2 answers. That's the multiple real solutions part here. All right, that's all the hints I have for you for today. A lot of time to work. If you need practice, you can always do some of the ones that you're allowed to skip. In other words, not like the odd ones are poisonous. You just don't have to do them. But if you need them for practice, they're there. Okay, that's all I got for the video for today.